With an eye on the future games, that is, I welcome in Nathan Brody, Prep Baseball Report Director of Multimedia and Scouting, as we dive into this week's future games at LakePoint Sports. Brody, thanks, and I hope you're suitably hyped for a big week.
Oh, absolutely, man. It's a big part of the summer and part of a baseball binge for me going between events. But future games is a must see, that's for sure, and for players a must attend.
Last year obviously had its challenges, but the future games still went down. COVID-19 restrictions led to locations in Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and here in Georgia. It's obviously back to the hoopla at LakePoint Sports. As you've talked to state directors and others within the industry, what's the excitement level like to be back onto the full-on future games?
It's very high. As you know, like when we had the NPI earlier in the season, you walked into the ballpark and something was different. It's like, oh, college coaches are back out. So the fact that everything's back in one spot, for the future games, we got 32 teams. All the coaches can come back out now. That energy is palpable, and we're getting that back. Last year was great given the circumstances, but to have everyone back in one location, we're very excited.
You mentioned 32 teams, and I remember I've talked to Sean Duncan about this before. The growth of the event is, it's pretty ridiculous. You think about 2011 going from a group of 4 teams in what was just called the Midwest Future Games then. Now you've got this sheer volume of athletes, but it's not just that. The evaluation tools that are at a player's disposal, the amount of attention. Over 300 college coaches have been on campus for this event in years past. You've been with PBR since 2013. How have you seen this platform grow?
It's been wild. Obviously, just like the company seeing it explode over the last 8 years. But the Future Games, the Midwest Future Games, was the first event that I attended that was a PBR event when I had been hired. And it was, I think there was 6 teams, and we were at Indiana University, and everything just kind of rotated in front of you. We were on one field. 2 teams did a workout and then they played, and then 2 teams did a workout and then they played. And just now you can't really do that anymore. There's way too much to be seen. So it's been tremendous growth, and it's taken off because it's across the country now.
What would you kind of attribute that to? Is it simply, that you have the right people pushing it out to, their followers and just generating it that way? Or does it come from more, the fabric of PBR and the fact that you guys have expanded to so many states? What would you, if you had to put your fingerprint, your finger on that element of it that's helped it to grow that much, what is it?
I think it's both of those factors. Obviously, when somebody comes to a PBR event and has a good experience, they tell somebody else about it. When a coach comes to a PBR event and is like, man, that event was amazingly run, I got to see the players I needed to see, that word gets out as well. And, that helps our growth across the country, and people see what we do. And then with the players, with the future games, they see the opportunity they get. Nowhere else are you going to find that many coaches in one spot. There are plenty of events out there that are great for college coaches and to get to seeing guys, but they're going off different locations. Here, you got 4 fields. If you need to sit with your head on the swivel, you can. And they're all just packed into this one little spot, and you get to see the best uncommitted players in the country. That growth is organic. That's a train that you can't stop.
We're 2 weeks removed from the MLB draft, and I mentioned that to bring up Micah Buckner. He went into the 2019 Future Games for Canada, a relatively unknown for British Columbia, out of British Columbia, hit 90 mile an hour in that event, had 5 Power 5 schools calling him afterwards. He's a Washington commit, was picked up by the Blue Jays in the 16th round, remains unsigned. Rudy, his story certainly speaks to the power of the Future Games as a stage and what it can mean for a player that takes full advantage.
It absolutely does. The future games is very much about guys that are uncommitted. Get out on the field. You got 300 college coaches there bearing down on you that you're hoping that you're going to hear from, get offers from. But it's also a look to, it's called the future games. It's a look to the future talent. And I obviously, my main focus is the draft, and that's what I go into here looking for is like, okay, who are the guys that I'm going to need to know about for a couple of years from now? Who are the Micah Bucknams? Who are the Harry Fords? He had a breakout performance a couple of years ago at the Future Games, and he just went 12th overall to the Mariners. So when I go in, that's what I'm looking for because my focus is on the draft. But there's tons of talent to be seen, and and we'll see guys that we don't know about that in a couple of years. It's like, oh wait, He was at Future Games, and now look at him. So
You mentioned Harry Ford, and obviously Buckner. I mean, we've seen passing MVPs like Colby Fitch in 2012. He's with the Phillies now. Nolan Watson from 2013 is with the Royals. Sam Carlson from 2015, obviously a Mariner now. Helium has been a part of this. We've talked about a couple of guys here, but what other cases have you seen of someone where, this has been the start of something big for them?
well, I mean, you talk about MVPs. Mac Horvath, was a guy on Team Minnesota, Iowa, Nebraska, and he's an MVP now at North Carolina. Got some attention in the draft last year in 2020. Was at IMG for the spring. He's a guy that blew up. Jared Jones a couple of years ago was on that Georgia team with Harry Ford. Jared Jones is now in this 22 class, and a name that we should be watching. One of the most majestic BPs I've ever seen at the Future Games. Joey Wentz is one that really comes to mind because we saw him when we were still out in Grant Park in Indianapolis, and he was a two-way guy. Big time power from the left side, but he could pitch a little bit and he was athletic. And if he had ended up on campus, he would have been a two-way player. But he went on the showcase circuit, going into his senior year, he didn't pitch. He was a hitter. And we kept saying, like, you guys, like, he's putting on a majestic BP, but you really should see him pitch. And he didn't pitch at all that summer. Comes out Super 60 in that spring, lights it up, ends up going, like in the supplemental round or something like that as a pitcher. And that whole time we're like, this guy can really pitch. We saw it at the Future Games. He just hasn't done it much since then. And now he's in the Tiger system and hopefully knocking on the door to the big leagues at some point.
Yeah, the Braves and the Tigers will both attest that Joey Wentz can pitch. So let's turn our attention to this week. Get started with the workout day on Wednesday. Games start on Thursday for both the Future Games and the Junior Future Games. The Future Games, obviously, including 2023s and 2024s. You've sourced your intel from the state directors. You've seen a number of these guys in person. Who are you most excited to see?
Well, like I said, looking from a draft perspective, the first thing I'm going to think about is the big three with California, Texas, and Florida. Big four, throw Georgia in there as well. A lot of talent comes out of those states. So I'm going to be looking at those teams and seeing what they have to offer this year. From California, there's a crew of guys from Orange Lutheran High School, one of the best high school programs in the country. I think there's 5 or 6 guys on the team, but namely Ben Ryland, Derek Curiel are very talented 2024s that I got to see a glimpse of in the spring. Athletic players, good hitters. Looking forward to seeing them again. Casey Borba is a right-handed bat that he can really hit, so I'm interested in getting more looks at him. Out of Harvard Westlake, we have Will Gasparino coming. I got a glimpse of him in the spring as well. And looking forward to seeing the progress that he's made. His dad is the scouting director for the Dodgers. So he's got those bloodlines. So looking forward to seeing what he can do. Out of Florida, Christian Rodriguez has been up to 95 this summer. Our guys down there tell me. You look at the frame, I think it's like 5'11", 160, 180, kind of in that range. So quote unquote undersized for a pitcher, but he runs it up to 95. So I'm definitely got his name circled to see on the mound. Jake DeValk is a kid out of Alabama that I saw last summer. I was at a tournament, shooter couldn't get to it, and he was like, hey, go take a look at this guy at Alabama. Let me know what you think. He's athletic, he's projectable, and he just pumped a ton of strikes, which is the first thing that we look for in guys. So I'm interested to see the progress that he has made. Then lastly, out of Nevada, Ty Southisine is a guy that Brett Harrison, our guy out there, just continuously raves about. We brought him up on a show we did in the offseason saying this is the 2024 to know about coming out of Nevada. And I got a very brief glimpse of him at the NPI earlier this summer. So I'm hoping to get a much better up close look at him. But I hear it's electric, tons of energy out on the field, and one of the best defenders, if not the best defender in Nevada, regardless of what class.
You think he has the opportunity to be that kind of player that everyone's going to be talking about when this event's over with?
100%. Absolutely. The way that the energy that he brings to the field, and then couple that with the talent and skills that he has, he probably very easily could endear himself with everybody.
I mentioned all the evaluation tools available. Players will use both Blast and TrackMan as data for data collection purposes. Future Games records stand fastball velocity, infield velocity, outfield velocity, pop time, exit velocity, 60 time. If I had to ask you, and I'm not asking for a player, I'm asking for the stat. If you now that everyone's kind of has these numbers. They know what they're shooting for. If you had to pick one of those that you thought was going to be most likely to fall over these next few days, what's it going to be?
I mean, fastball velocity we've seen jump so much just in the game in general. Guys are throwing harder and harder, and they're throwing harder at a younger age. That's probably the one that's easiest to break. I would think the run time I know is way up there. I do think there are some guys that might flirt with it from what I've been told, but I don't know if that one's going to be that's a tough one to break. But fastball velocity is probably the one that has the best chance to go down. But these kids are getting bigger and stronger too, so I'm sure exit velocity will certainly the record holder from previous years might be sweating a little bit.
It'd be fun to see them make some runs and those records go down. He is Nathan Rohde on Twitter at Nathan Rohde. Get out to LakePoint Sports for the feature games, and if you can't make it, we've still got you covered with LakePoint Live, powered by PlaySite. Get to LakePointSports.com for all the info. Rohde, thanks so much and appreciate it. We'll see you out at the baseball village.
Excellent. Looking forward to it, Court.